Hi, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kelly Harrell. I have been a teacher now for 25 years. I have had the privilege of homeschooling my own kids. My son just graduated from high school last year, and my daughter is in 10th grade, and we're still homeschooling. And over the past 12 years, I've had the privilege of walking the homeschool road with several families, probably just like yours. So I just wanted to take a couple minutes today to start this series of videos on different issues when you're doing homeschool. So we're going to call this the emergency homeschool series because I know some of you, this was not your choice. My husband and I entered into the homeschool world with a lot of prayer, with a lot of consideration and planning, and it still threw us for a loop. I'm not going to lie about it. It is not an easy journey. And some of you might have got the notice on one day that the next day your kid is going to be home with you. And now, if you live in California at least, you know your child's going to be home with you through April. And maybe if you live in one of the states that has shut down school for the entire year, well, what are you going to do now? So, today's tip is one of the tips that we learn first in teaching, and that is all about classroom management. Now, you might laugh and say, well, classroom management, what does that look like in homeschool? Well, this is the thing. It's very important in your homeschool world to actually have classroom management. I learned this really early on. There is a difference between disciplining your child and teaching your child. It's a whole new world. And you're probably experiencing it right now, or maybe you've been homeschooling for years and you just decide to check out this video. But what happened to us is our son, his birthday is at the end of September. So he was actually turning 5. And we were really torn on what we should do. Should we put him in and have him be young? Should we hold him back? Because California had started to change the age of when people could enter kindergarten. And I taught kindergarten for 6 years. So I knew sometimes it didn't work out well if your kid had a fall birthday to put him in kinder. So we had him in a pre-K class the year before we decided to homeschool. Then different situations, we decided to bring him home. And so we actually skipped kindergarten and started in first grade because he was already reading. So here was the thing. I had my house done up like my classroom. I had a desk for each one of my kids. My daughter was 3 years old at the time, so we were going to do preschool at home. We had the American flag. We had the Christian flag. We had this full-on calendar in the family room. God bless my husband for putting up with all that. And I will never forget the first 2 weeks, the struggle I had when I would go to show him how to make a letter or how to write his numbers. And he would look at me and he would say, "That's not how Miss Janelle taught me. That's not how Miss Janelle taught me." And I heard that so many times, you guys, I was like over the top and I was so done with it. And one day I looked at him, and because most of the time I would say, "But that's what I'm asking you to do." Right? Like, let's just be honest. I would say, "Well, I said so, do it this way." But it didn't stop him from saying it. And one day I looked at him in the face and I said, "Noah, would you ever tell Miss Janelle no and tell her she was wrong?" And all of a sudden his eyes got all wide because he was totally a rule follower, right? And totally respected authority. And he said, "Oh no, Mom, I never do that." And I said, "Well, baby, I'm your teacher now. So I need you to do it the way I tell you to." And I have to tell you, that just changed everything in that moment. Now, he didn't become like this very compliant kid who never did anything wrong, but something clicked in him. And so you might be up against that at home. You might be trying to teach your child, and they might be saying, "That's not the way you do it. That's not the way my teacher told me to do it." So you have a couple options. Number one, you can tell them, if they're older, you could say, "Well, would you like to explain it to me how your teacher taught you?" Because you know what? That's actually one of the marks of seeing of higher level thinking is having the student explain it. That's kind of like why Common Core math has them explain and do all these funky steps, um, because it shows higher level of thinking. So if you want to invite them to share with you how their teacher taught them, you can do that. Another thing you can do though is say, listen, would you talk back to your teacher in the classroom? I need you to remember that I'm your teacher right now. The talking back has to stop. And then along with that, you also have to have consequences for if it doesn't stop. About the time we started homeschooling, I also started reading this phenomenal book called Say Goodbye to Whining and Complaining and All Around Bad Attitudes in You and Your Child. I know it's a really long title. I'll say it again. Say goodbye to whining, complaining, and all around bad attitudes in you and your child. And it was really cool. The very first thing that it taught you was that you have to teach your children to obey. And obey means to do what's expected, when it's expected, without questioning. And so it taught us to play this game with the kids. And we started really simple. Again, my kids were 5 and 3. And the game was, I told them this one day, I said, so throughout the day, I'm going to call your name and ask you to come here. And when I do that, whatever you're doing, I want you to stop and you have to come as soon as possible. And see, what they didn't know was this was training them to obey. And I told them, I said, if you do this and if you come right away, I'm going to have a special surprise for you. So like really what I had was a bag of M&Ms. Okay. So throughout the day, all of a sudden I would randomly call their names. Sometimes I'd call both of them. Sometimes I'd call one of them. And their response, I told them, when I call your name, your response needs to be coming, Mom, and then you need to come. And you guys, it worked like a charm. Even when they found out all they were getting was a handful of M&Ms, they were so over the top excited, right, that they were doing it. At one point, I even called for them, and one of them was in the bathroom, and all of a sudden, I think it was my daughter, and all of a sudden I heard her crying. And she was like, I can't come right now. And so then that was good. That was a good lesson for all of us. And that's when I started saying, okay, so if you can't come, you need to say, just a minute, Mom, I'm in the restroom. Or you need to tell me whatever you're doing so I know that you heard me and so I know that you'll come. So the second day when I called them, they ran, right, as fast as could be, expecting M&Ms, but instead I just gave them verbal praise. And I'm like, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. But then it was like no longer a game. It was just the expectation, and it became the expectation. This is the thing about classroom discipline, even when you homeschool. It needs to be the expectation that they obey whenever you ask them to do something. It's not a, yeah, whatever. It's not a, I'm too busy. It's obey every time, whenever you're asked. So then, of course, we got into some, times where they weren't obeying. And so then there were consequences. We also taught them that with greater privileges, with greater responsibility came greater privileges. Therefore, when you're not responsible, you have privileges taken away. I'll say that again. So with greater responsibility comes greater privileges. So as they do more things, they get more privileges. However, if you're not being responsible, you get privileges taken away. So, I wouldn't do it for just little things. In the beginning, it was the reminder, you know what? I asked you to come, you didn't come. And then one day, I think for my son, his big thing was he would be on the computer and he just wouldn't come. And he wouldn't respond, he wouldn't do what I asked. And at that point, because I had already given him a warning, so you get one warning, and after that, it was, you have now lost your privilege of playing on the computer for 2 days. And The other thing then that we instigated later, because sometimes it wasn't just enough to take away a privilege, we actually give work duty. So we do not give allowance in our house. We just have the opinion that you're part of the family, and so it's your job to help out, and everyone has their own chores. But if you have been disobedient and you have had responsibilities taken away, if it's a greater disobedience, then you also could end up having work duty. Work duty is not like you have to do the dishes, because that's like a job everyone kind of has. Work duty is like scrubbing the baseboards. Work duty is, getting the big duster for the roof and getting the cobwebs out from around the roof. Fun fact, like my daughter loves to do that now. And once in a while when we're having people over, I'll be like, "Oh, Becca, can you dust the roof?" She's like, "Yeah, I love it." But that started out as a work duty. Scrubbing doors. Gosh, have you looked at your doors lately? They can get kind of gross. Or maybe you have a super clean house. I don't, because I homeschool. My kids are always here. So classroom discipline is really important. Parents, don't just tell yourself, it's okay, somehow we're going to get through this, and they're talking back to me, and oh, well, we just have to push through. I tell you, they will actually respect you more, even if they never say it, if you show discipline and if you have control. Doesn't mean yelling. In fact, whenever I felt like I was going to lose it, I would go put myself on a timeout when I put them on a timeout. But it does mean that you have expectations, and you follow through on them. And if the kids do not obey, that there are consequences. If your child has been in a traditional school, in elementary school, they might come home with a different color every day. That was our classroom discipline. You know, you might even get weekly reports of their behavior. This is the same thing. If you want to instigate, if your kid does well with the color system, and if you have more than one or two kids, if you want to instigate the color system in your home, go for it. Be creative, find ways, find things that work. I know parents that do sticker charts. And when the kids complete, work without whining and complaining, then they get a sticker. It's hard. No one's saying that this is easy. It's absolutely not easy. And with everything going on right now, they're going to feel kind of out of control and not really knowing, what's going on and what does this mean and why is so and so's birthday party canceled. And I just had lunch with my daughter. She's upset that the next Avenger movie isn't going to come out in April. There's a lot of disappointments going on right now. But to have discipline and to have order within your home while your students are learning, it really does help to promote learning. And it really does also help them to feel safe. It helps them to feel more safe and secure. I taught in the regular classroom for 12 years. I was in a lot of different classrooms. I could be in a classroom for 5 minutes and I would know whether or not the teacher had good classroom discipline. If she didn't, or if he didn't, then the kids were yelling and screaming and running, and it felt like chaos. Have you ever been in a classroom where it just feels like chaos? Or maybe right now in your house, it's feeling a little bit like chaos. The thing that the discipline does is it brings peace back. It brings peace into everyone's soul. And I tell you, for like 2 weeks when we first started homeschooling, all I did, the whole purpose of every day, my goal was to make sure they obeyed. Now I gave them work to do, and we had other projects, and we went outside, but the underlying thing of everything we did was I have to get my kids to obey me. And it was tough. And by the end of every day, I was emotionally exhausted because I was trying to keep it together. I was trying to not get upset. But I'll never forget, like at the end of that 2 weeks, we went to a park and we were playing. And I also did this thing where I didn't count to have my kids come or whatever. If they were playing, I would give them a 5-minute warning. Hey guys, we're going to go in 5 minutes. And then at the end of that 5 minutes, I would call them and we would leave. And I was talking to this mom and we'd been there for a while. So I gave my kids 5-minute warning. And at the end of the 5 minutes, I called them and they came like that. Like that. No hesitation. Yes, mom. Down the slide, ran over to me, grabbed their water bottles. And the mom looked at me like shocked. And she's like, how did you do that? I don't even understand. I can't get my kids to do that. And that was when all of a sudden I had like this moment of, wow, I've accomplished something. You know, it didn't matter that, hey, I taught them the Pledge of Allegiance. It didn't matter that, hey, my daughter at 3 was writing her name. Gosh, you know what? What was most important at that time was that they obeyed. So I know it's not easy, but set down the rules and the expectations in your home. Set learning times, set learning schedules. We'll talk about that in other videos. Maybe we'll do a video on that tomorrow. It doesn't have to look like what school did look like, but put forth the expectations. Maybe have a discussion about them with them about, hey, we might be doing stuff different at home, and that's okay. And if you want to tell me how your teacher did it, that's fine. But when it comes down to it, I'm going to be your teacher for the next, I don't know, couple weeks, several months. We'll see. But set those boundaries in place. I encourage you, play games with your kids, like calling them and giving them something when they come. Maybe, well, you probably don't want to go to the grocery store right now, but maybe you have some candy. Maybe a special treat for them, you know, when you call them. Giving them little tasks. When you call them, maybe give them a little task. Hey, can you do me a favor and can you go put this in the trash can? Just to make them feel important and special. And also, though, to get them in that mindset of obeying, because then the rest of your day will go so much smoother. If you have teenagers, God bless you. I know that's so difficult. And that can be a whole new level of, well, I need you to do this. And maybe it's let's set a timer, let's do sticky notes. My daughter kind of schedules her own day, but I also give her things to do. So she has gotten really good about putting sticky notes on her door. So she'll see them, so she'll remember to mop. And so she'll remember to do whatever it is I ask them to. So I know it's crazy times right now, but I also know you can do it. I am, I'm just a sinner saved by grace. And somehow I graduated my son from high school. We stayed the course. So you got this. You got the next couple months. Because you know what? When it comes down to it, you know your child better than anyone. And you can teach your child. I tell parents all the time, homeschooling will be the hardest thing you ever do in your life. And friends, if this is not something you signed up for, I get it and I get the frustration, but I also know you can do it. Just take it one step at a time. And today, maybe all you worry about is your classroom discipline. Okay? I'll talk to you later.